Ooh, a spicy question. I
Because
love
the
it.
writing is sort of everything, right? Like you kind of can fix plot holes, but if the writing isn't
So some
there,
readers love that, and some readers are like, but I wanted more of this. So it's kind of a gamble.
Hello and welcome back to the Right and Wrong podcast. On today's episode, I am joined by New York Times bestselling horror author, screenwriter, and non-fiction writer Grady Hendrix. Hello.
Hey, thanks for having me, man.
Thanks so much for coming on. Let's start with, as always, the latest publication, which will be out as of this airing. That is the paperback version of your Sunday Times bestselling Witchcraft for Wayward Girls. Tell us a little bit about the book.
Yeah, well, this is just my horror novel set in 1970 in a Florida maternity home, which is where people used to send unwed mothers, usually teenage girls, when they got pregnant. And there's about 4 girls who were sent there, and these were really awful for these women, because not just the conditions, which varied from home to home, but the fact that you had no idea what was going on. You had no idea what was going to happen when you had your baby. No one would tell you. You had no idea what was going to happen to your baby after that. Usually they were taken from you and put up for adoption. You had no idea what was going to happen when you got back home and had to pretend none of this ever happened and you were just visiting an aunt for the summer. And so these girls, they didn't use their real names. They didn't get to tell each other their hometowns. This was, completely secret. You were completely isolated and had zero power. And for the girls in this home, they discover a paperback book about witchcraft that happens to actually teach them real witchcraft. And suddenly they have all the information and power they ever wanted, and complications ensue.
Okay, so this is based on not obviously the witchcraft part, well, maybe, but the sort of location, the geography. This is based on things that really did happen, historically accurate things.
Yeah, I mean, it's gosh, I can't remember the author's name, but she wrote that novella a couple of years ago, Small Things Like These, about the Magdalene laundries in Ireland. And I think most people associate maternity homes and homes for unwed mothers with the Magdalene laundries in Ireland, but they were everywhere. I mean, They were in Japan, they were in China, they were in France, they were across the UK, and especially they were in the States. I mean, between 1945 and 1973, when abortion became illegal in the States, there were about 190 of these homes across the US. And I think it's real hard to get numbers for them because a lot of them, burned their records or, destroyed them afterwards when they shut down. But people estimate about 2 million kids were adopted from these homes. I mean, they touched a lot of lives, and we like to try to forget about them. And that's what horror does, right? It's the return of the things you thought you'd buried.
Yeah. Was it Claire Keegan?
That's it. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. They got made into a movie with Cillian Murphy.
Yeah, I know the one. So in terms, when it comes to like you're doing something which is based on a historical thing, was there a research component to the creation of this book?
Oh yeah, enormous. I mean, my books usually take about a year to write, and this one took me 2. Wow. Getting the homes. I mean, there's really only one standard history of the homes, Anne Fessler's The Girls Who Went Away. There's an academic book or two and articles, but it's a lot of deep diving. I mean, these have really been purged from American history in particular. But it wasn't just the homes. It was also 1970 itself. I mean, we have a lot of cliched ideas about the 70s, but what it was really like was difficult to try to replicate. And the fact that I am a childless middle-aged man writing a book in which every character is a pregnant teenage girl. I mean, I worked with a lot of moms, a lot of obstetricians. I took online classes. Like it was a lot of research.
Okay. Yeah. Do you tend to do a lot of research for all of your novels, or was this one sort of more than you usually do?
This one was more than normal in this, just because it was such a specific setting, and it was 1970, which is an era, I was born in 72. But in general, yeah, I do a ton of research. I feel like you got to get it right. I'm working on a book right now. I've got the first draft turned in. and got notes back from my editor. So I'm doing that first big rewrite. And, I'm looking at I've got tons of research stuff, but I often post the most relevant stuff on the wall over where I write. And so I've got everything from movie listings for the weekend the book takes place over, and the weekend before and the weekend after, to the weather report for the 4 days the book takes place during, sketches, concept art. I work with a lot of artists to do stuff like that. And, the book takes place in 1986, and it's like, I've just got all this reference from 86 and maps. Oh yeah, there's my map. I've got maps of all the locations. Some are hand drawn, some are like Google Maps that I hand annotate. I just feel like there's no, with a reader, the reader really wants to believe in the writer, that you have the authority and the knowledge to tell this story, that you are telling them something that happened. And I just think there's no excuse to get it wrong. And of course you get it wrong, right? Like, no matter how careful you are, people are like, well, actually, but dude, you gotta bend over backwards to get it as best you can. At least that's how I feel, Yeah. And the problem with that is, it's really hard for me to read books by writers who that's just not their thing. And there's plenty of books that aren't, right? There's lots of books where the writer they don't care about that. They're focused on something else, which is totally, to them, it's a legit choice. Many of these writers sell more books than I do. But for me, it really drops me out of the story. Like, I just read a book that's like a New York Times bestseller, and it's set in a town that I know pretty well. And I'm just like, no. This is not right at all. So I've ruined my ability to enjoy myself.
Oh, no. But yeah, it sounds like you go incredibly deep on your research. And is everything you write, does it tend to be historical, like of a certain time? So you do have the kind of the hindsight resource to look at everything that happened around and within that period?
Yeah, it's a little bit boring of me. I've got books like Final Girl Support Group or Horror Store or How to Sell a Haunted House that are contemporary, right? Mm-hmm. And then I've got books like Witchcraft for Wayward Girls or My Best Friend's Exorcism, or the one I'm working on now, that I set in the past. And the reason I do that is, with Witchcraft for Wayward Girls, it has to be set before Roe versus Wade, right? It has to be set before 73 when abortion became legal. But like with the book I'm working on now, or with My Best Friend's Exorcism, it's set in sort of a high school, and I don't know high school now. You know what I mean? It's vaping, it's cell phones, it's active shooter drills. I don't know that stuff. Yeah. And, so I have to set it in a period where I can where I can, smell it, where I can like really like be right about an authentic experience. And so I kind of hate that, but at the same time, it's like, the research rabbit hole is endless. You know what I mean? if you allow it to be.
Yeah, I understand. So once you've built up all of this research and you've got everything down, like you know what the weather's going to be like, you know exactly what happens, at various different places around the local area. Are you the kind of writer that then plans out all of the prose, all of the chapters, what's going to happen in each of them, or do you just jump straight into the writing and are you pantsing all the way?
Yeah, well, this is interesting, right? I was just at this festival this past weekend, and God help me, I had to moderate a panel about plotting with these other writers. And I really didn't want to do that because there's always that question, right? Are you a pantser or a plotter, And I got to say, there's a bit of disingenuousness to that question, or a bit in which it's a little out of touch with how writing works, because in general, if you write professionally, you've got to give your editor something in advance, whether it's a one-page outline or one of the people on the panel, she does a chapter outline, chapter by chapter before she starts writing. And even the ones who just like to jump right in, you've got to give your editor something. And so, so there's an element where we're all plotters on the one hand. And so for me, there's sort of two answers. One is I generally will have a pretty good idea of what's going to happen, and I will start writing. And about 2/3 of the way through that first draft, I will the book just runs out of juice. It just runs out of gas.
Okay.
And it generally, and so then I'll go back and I'll do a lot of like background work and all that, character bios, like all this stuff. And generally what happens over the next disgusting number of drafts is I start stripping out plot and adding in more character work, because ultimately that's what readers care about, is the character, right? Like, they want to know. What always happens to me is I wind up jettisoning, oh, that was such a cool scene that I really want to write. And it's like, nope. What people really want is a chapter with that character figuring out what just happened to them and reacting to it. And then the other part of that answer is, I was a theater guy for a long time, and then a film guy for a long time before I started writing books. And I really, really, really believe in the way movies are made, in the sense that you go over and over and over and over it, right? You pitch a concept, you boil it down to one sentence of a log line. Then you like come up with an outline. Then you write a draft and another draft and another draft. And tons of people look at this draft and give feedback, and until you finally come up with the draft. And that's the first step, because then they're going to shoot it. And oftentimes they're going to figure out stuff on the day that works better than what's on paper, right? The script is just a blueprint. And then they're going to get into the editing room and rearrange all of that into the best version possible. And then if they need to, they go back and do reshoots. I mean, it's amazing how seat of its pants movies that are famous now, lines that are iconic, scenes that are iconic, that stuff came up on the day or was fixed in the editing room or was part of a reshoot. And so I think for writers, and especially for me, what I take away from that is you've got to have the most rock solid amount of preparation possible, because that allows you to throw away that preparation when you're working and come up with you've come up with the best idea after going through 5 ideas. And then as you're sitting there writing that chapter, you come up with the 6th best idea, but you needed those other 5 to get there. And then I really believe in going back and rewriting. I mean, Witchcraft, I think it's 14 drafts, and those are significantly different drafts. Like the first 2 drafts didn't even have witches in it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I'm working on the book I'm working on right now. I've known the ending of this book for years, and I just realized it's the wrong ending, and it's out, and it's an ending that I'm really married to, and it's like, it's gone. You just have to keep going back and reworking and reworking and reworking. For me, this is how I work. It's a terribly inefficient way to work. I'm getting slower instead of faster, but there you go.
Okay. But I think there's definitely a learned skill through just practicing the craft, where it's the ability to know that something isn't right for something, no matter how it could be the best thing you've ever written, but to know that it's not right for this story, I think is something. It's a difficult thing to learn.
Yeah. And it's like, I did this book, my second book, My Best Friend's Exorcism. There's a better book that I just wasn't good enough to pull off. But there was a much more sophisticated, much smarter, much more structurally tricky book that I really was committed to, that I wrote drafts of, that had a sort of dual timeline structure, and it jumped between two different points of view, and it followed the characters into adulthood and came back. I mean, it was really a really interesting book, but it wasn't the right book. I didn't have the skill to pull it off, and it wasn't what readers were interested in. I really give my books, I really listen to feedback. I've got a couple of people who read my books early, and as painful as it is, man, if they tell me there's a problem, there's a problem.
Okay. Are these people who you've met through being an author and writing, or are these like family, friends, like people you've known your whole life?
Well, okay, so one is my wife. She reads everything first, and she's the first person to pull the emergency brake.
Okay.
And then my editor and my agent. My agent's good. He sort of gives higher level notes, which I appreciate. And usually if he smells something wrong, he's not wrong. But my editor, whoever it is someone I really go back and forth with. And, at my previous publisher, there was a point where I was like, I had a new editor, and I was like, after doing 4 books with the same guy, the same editor, And I was just like, this editor isn't working for me. I need a new editor. And it caused, I mean, they were really pissed off, to put it mildly. I mean, it was just like, this is the head of this imprint. And I'm like, yeah, they're not the right editor for me. They don't have the time. They don't have the energy. They're not reading the drafts fast enough. They're not giving me actionable feedback. I write a lot of drafts. I mean, my current editor at one point when we were doing our second book together, she's like, this is a lot of drafts coming through. And I'm like, she's like, I haven't really worked with a writer who does this. And I'm like, sorry, man, it's a lot of drafts. I apologize. But yeah, so then the editor, and I really go back and forth with an editor, but then there's other people who at some point in there, I often pull in. Some of them are writers, I know. Few of them, there's only one person, two actually, who I've known for a long time as friends, who I will give a book to read because both of them work professionally in publishing, and like I really trust both of them. But mostly it's people I work with because I just generate a huge number of drafts. Like I'd rather rewrite a book top to bottom than go through and fidget with a few bits and pieces here and there.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And in terms of process, you've written also non-fiction books.
Yes.
Most recently, These Fists Break Bricks. Is that a very different process for you than when you're doing the fiction stuff?
It is and it isn't. I mean, the research is killer on that stuff. And it's the reason I write much less nonfiction. The problem, writing fiction is like, well, she got in a car and she drove down the road and she had a waffle and you can just make that crap up. But like nonfiction, it's like every sentence has to be true. And thank God with These Fists Break Bricks, which is about like sort of martial arts movies coming to America, I worked with this guy, Chris Bajali, who is an insanely good researcher. He's a professional librarian and he really knows film. He writes a lot about film. He's sort of a film historian of like cult movies and horror movies and action movies. And Chris, I mean, I was sort of gobsmacked by the stuff he brought back. I mean, at one point he managed through a random IMDb comment that he sort of started to pick at, wound up with us sitting in the living room of the children and the wife of a spy in the 1960s who had been stationed in Japan, running a complete false front operation as a film producer while trying to expose communists in the Japanese film industry. Like Chris is that detailed. It was wild. And the thing with that book, with These Fists Break Bricks, is also nonfiction tends to be a little shorter than fiction, right? And especially with like paperbacks from Hell or These Fists, which have a lot of art in them, they're usually in the 70 to 80,000 word range rather than the 80 to 100,000 word range. And so for those, man, I would just rewrite those manuscripts start to finish with every pass, just like, boop, let's go right back to the beginning,
Oh, wow.
So it's similar, but the structure usually doesn't change with those books. But the amount of rewriting stays the same as with fiction. Yeah.
Writing is rewriting. You mentioned film there. You mentioned film previously and how you're fascinated by the process of film. One of your novels, My Best Friend's Exorcism, was adapted into a film. Very cool. How involved were you with the adaptation?
Yeah, almost not at all.
Okay.
I made a huge mistake because I sort of did that thing that a lot of people figure, I think a lot of writers do, which is, well, the book's the book, the movie's the movie, which is a very mature way of looking at it. And they sent me a script early on, and I was, and then we had a phone meeting to talk about, you got any notes on the script? And what I've learned since then is the job of the writer is to say at those meetings, oh, this is great. I really love it.
Okay.
And for me, for some reason, they had inserted a lot of sex into this script and a lot of sexual abuse and a lot of rape. And I was just kind of like, guys, you're missing the point here. And also, these are underage characters who are teenagers. And so this is all statutory rape you've gotten here. Like, is that really the movie you want to be making? I think this is pretty appalling. And the response to that was dead silence. The call ended, and 3 years later, I got a call that the movie was going to be premiering. Did I want to come? Uh,
Wow.
and
Okay.
and I was, really terrified to go see the movie because I was like, this is going to be bad. And thank God they had brought in a new producer. They had done they had taken out all the sexual stuff. I was like sitting there sweating in that theater. And I think the actors did a great job. I think there were some structural problems they never took the time to solve, which I still regret. I think the ending would have been tricky to adapt into a movie no matter what. But I think when something's tricky, you sit down and you do it over and over and over again, and you don't stop with the ending that everyone agrees on. You keep going until you get to the right ending. And I think they stopped on the ending everyone could agree on. I get it. That's movie production. Everyone's worried, everyone's second guessing, everyone would rather be safe than good. But like, I think they never quite licked that problem, and I think it kept it from being as good as it could have been.
Okay, yeah, that's a shame.
Yeah, but the actors were great, and that was something that was really nice to see, is how much the actors did with it. I thought that's one of those things. It's always nice to be surprised.
Yeah, okay. I've seen that a lot of your other works are optioned, some things in pre-production even. Are you planning to be more involved with like future adaptations, or are you again just going to be hands off?
Oh no, more. I am 100% more involved. I mean, with stuff like How to Sell a Haunted House was your option for a film. I wrote the first 4 or 5 drafts. Same with Horror Store. Right. I'm one of the 3 writers on Southern Book Club if it gets made into a TV show. There's some point where you just start spreading yourself too thin, but I read the drafts. I'm involved. I'm doing the best I can, because I feel like a lot of times it's very easy with a movie to lose track of the story you're telling. And I feel like most stories, there's a log line, there's a sentence that's kind of the engine of that story. This is what it's about, this sentence. With My Best Friend's Exorcism, it's about 2 teenage girls whose friendship is strong enough to beat Satan. That's it. That's the story. Set it on Mars, make them talking reindeer. It doesn't matter. As long as you keep that sentence, as long as you keep that engine, you've got it. And I feel like it's easy to lose track of that. So my job, I think, on a lot of these is to just keep reminding people, this is what it's about. But, even then you get, things go in directions you don't anticipate. I mean, if you're a writer on a project, inevitably you're going to be fired off of it. That's just the way it works. It's rare that a movie gets to the screen without a couple of writers on it, even if only one is credited. With How to Sell a Haunted House, I think, here's a horror novel. It did really well. It was on the New York Times bestseller list. People really liked it. They optioned it, and then they were like, oh crap, no one dies in this book. Spoiler alert. But they're like, no one dies. And I was like, well, yeah, but it still works. You don't have to have but horror movies mean dead bodies, And right. So, when I came off the project, they brought in a writer who there's going to be a kill every 10 to 15 minutes. That's how it works. And more power to them. I mean, I've read those drafts of the script, and I actually think they work pretty well. And there's 1 or 2 things in there that I'm like, God, I should have thought of that for the book. That's a pretty good idea. But it really was this case of they optioned something and then realized this doesn't work for movies because there's not enough dead bodies. We need dead bodies.
Okay. That's interesting. Yeah. I mean, you also have to, it's a different medium, and like translating between mediums is a skill unto itself. So I guess at a certain point, unless you're very familiar with both mediums, it's like you do just sort of have to be like, well, I'll let people who have more experience doing this sort of take the reins and just hope for the best.
Yeah. And, with Haunted, and I get it. Like, if you're making a horror movie, where your mind is going is the audience experience is you want a packed theater on a Friday night or a Saturday night with a bunch of people between the ages of 18 and 31 who are having fun with their friends and screaming at the screen and laughing. and you want it to be very visual. With a book, the ideal audience is one person on their own, on the couch or wherever, reading it to themselves and being in their heads. And so the audiences are very different. And, there's stuff, they came up with a really good, for Haunted House, a really great visual idea that I had never thought of that's terrific because they're thinking visually because it's a movie. Whereas if you're writing a book, what you're coming up with are emotional ideas and character ideas because books are relentlessly interior, whereas movies are relentlessly exterior.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yeah, absolutely. The difference between the mediums and finding the balance. That brings us to the point in the episode where I drop you off at a cozy woodland cabin and leave you to be snowed in the middle of nowhere. What book do you hope to have with you?
Okay, so I think the book I would bring with me is I'm going to cheat a little. It's actually 6 books, but Michael McDowell's Blackwater Saga, which it's one novel, but it's told in 6 short novels that he published one a month in 1983, I believe. And it's the story of a Southern family in Alabama, ranging from about 1920, I believe, 1917 to 1970, early 70s. And they happen to marry into a family of underwater river monsters. And it is the 100 Years of Solitude of horror paperbacks. Michael McDowell's a writer that I can't read if I'm writing a book because he's so good. It just puts me to shame. He's most famous for having written the screenplays for Beetlejuice and Nightmare Before Christmas. He died in, I think, 90 of AIDS, but he is a really phenomenal writer and puts me to shame. Blackwater is one of those books that I could just get lost in. And it's interesting. It was actually Blackie Books, which is a Spanish publisher, reissued Blackwater last year in 2024. And it became a huge hit. Between France and Germany and Italy and Spain, it sold close to 3 million copies last year.
Wow.
I think they just released a UK edition. And it's great to see. But, there's a writer who's been dead for 30 something years, So, but it'd be Blackwater.
Okay, very cool. And that's cool to hear that it's having this wild resurgence across Europe.
It's very validating.
Very cool. Yeah. Next up, we are going to go back a bit, chat about when Grady first started writing, his initial break into the industry, self-publishing, finding an agent, all that fun stuff. That will be available at patreon.com/right and wrong.
They're writing, but that's really helpful for me when I get feedback from people. Oh, I lost my interest here, or I got confused here, or I got a little bored here. That's enormously helpful for a writer.
Yes, I think that's great advice because that really helps a writer identify where the pacing issues are within the story and maybe greater issues off the back of that. Awesome. Well, that's where we're gonna leave it on that. Thank you so much, Grady, for coming on the podcast and chatting with me and telling me all about everything that you've been up to with your writing and your kind of experiences and your journey through publishing. It's been really interesting chatting with you.
Oh, dude, thanks for having me.
And for anyone listening, if you want to keep up with what Grady is doing, you can follow him on Instagram at Grady Hendrix, or you can find him on his website, gradyhendrix.com. The paperback of Witchcraft for Wayward Girls is out January 1st, so it will be out by the time this airs. To support this podcast, like, follow, and subscribe. Join the Patreon for ad-free extended episodes and check out my other podcasts, The Chosen Ones and other Tropes. Thanks again to Grady, and thanks to everyone listening. We will catch you on the next episode. Shout out time. One of my amazing patrons, Lee Foxton, is querying their debut novel. It's a family drama, commercial fiction along the lines of Jojo Moyes and David Nichols. Fingers crossed, I am rooting for you. Good luck.